Hello, my name is Pastor Kathy Kollar. I'm the pastor of Pleasant Valley Lutheran Church near Malabar Farm and St. Paul Lutheran Church in Lucas, Ohio. Greetings. We're reading through the Bible with commentary, and we are to a new book, the book of 2 Samuel. Although when the book was originally written in Hebrew, 1st and 2nd Samuel were one book. So then when they translated into Greek, because as you might remember from your 8th grade history, at one point the Greeks ruled the whole world and everybody spoke Greek. And then after the Greeks came the Romans, but during the Roman times there were still lots of people speaking Greek. So the Old Testament, as the Hebrew Bible, was translated into Greek in something called the Septuagint. And sometimes when people are trying to figure out what exactly did the original Hebrew say, they look to the Septuagint to try to figure out. And there are things that the Septuagint will have different than our oldest manuscripts from the Hebrew Bible. So sometimes there's all these little footnotes, including as we get into 2 Samuel, Ishbaal or Ishbosheth, that they're both kind of the same name. The Hebrew had Ishbosheth, Sheth, I can't even say it right, but the Greek had Ishbaal, or maybe I have that the other way around. But there's some variation because of the translation into Greek, which of course happened during the times of the Greeks. So before Jesus, the Hebrew Bible was translated in the Septuagint. So as we read 2 Samuel, it's just a continuation of Samuel, but they stopped 1 Samuel at the death of King Saul. So Samuel was the last judge and a prophet and a priest who was dedicated to the Lord from birth, was a Nazirite, and then he actually dies about a third of the way through 1 Samuel, although King Saul brings him back, and he anoints Saul to be king. Saul is very tall and good looking, but he does not obey God. He is much more interested in public opinion than God's opinion, and he gets rejected by God. So then Samuel anoints David to be king. And so for the second half of 1 Samuel, we had lots of conflict between David, not king yet, and King Saul, who was trying to attack David, and David's like, I'm not touching the Lord's anointed, which he himself also is the Lord's anointed. And at the end of the book of 1 Samuel, David had gone over to the Philistine territory, was prepared to go and fight with the Philistines against the Israelites, and the Philistine commanders were like, no, we don't trust you, you need to go home. So he went back to his town of Ziklag, where he found that the Amalekites had come and raided and taken all the people and all the stuff. So he and his men, 600 men, went chasing after the Amalekites, and 200 of them had to stay at the wadi because they were exhausted. The other 400 went and got back all the women and children and stuff and brought them all back, and the people that were left behind were included. David said, no, if you stayed with the baggage, then you also get part of the spoils. So he had returned to Ziklag. Meanwhile, the Philistines had attacked the Israelites, and the Israelites lost. And King Saul, his son Jonathan, and 2 of other sons all died in the battle. And actually, King Saul said, I don't want to be killed by the Philistines, so he actually fell on his sword and killed himself. So that was at the end of 1 Samuel, was the death of King Saul and 3 of his sons. So we pick up in 2 Samuel pretty much directly, because it really was originally the same book. 2 Samuel primarily deals with David and all of the intrigue and the politics, and I believe it also has some of Solomon. Now that I've said that, I'm not sure. But as I'm reading the commentary about 2 Samuel, it's a very violent book. There's a lot of politics. David is a man after God's own heart, but he also is a very human person, and so he screws up literally royally. He makes all kinds of terrible mistakes and gets corrected for them. So he's the commentary that I have describes him as the most well-rounded person in the Old Testament. We know the most about David. Possibly there were people from his court that were recording things as he went through. Some of it just he was King David. So, but it's not an immediate like, okay, we had Saul, now we have David, because Saul was king and he had sons, and not all of the sons got killed. So it's not an automatic, okay, David is now king. There's lots of intrigue and politics, as we're about to hear. So we begin in 2 Samuel chapter 1. After the death of Saul, when David had returned from defeating the Amalekites, David remained 2 days in Ziklag. On the third day, a man came from Saul's camp. So David has gone, and after the raiders from the Amalekites brought all his people back to his burned down city, so of course his people are going to rest. They're going to recover from this raid and get everything back in order. So he's at home. He's not part of this Israeli battle. On the third day, a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. When he came to David, he fell to the ground and did obeisance. That means he gave him honor, he bowed, he was down on his face. David said to him, "Where have you come from?" He said to him, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." David said to him, "How did things go? Tell me." He answered, "The army fled from the battle, but also many of the army fell and died. And Saul and his son Jonathan also died." Then David asked the young man who was reporting to him, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan died?" The young man reporting to him said, "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, and there was Saul leaning on his spear, while the chariots and the horsemen drew close to him. When he looked behind him and saw me, he called to me. I answered, 'Here, sir.' And he said to me, 'Who are you?' I answered him, 'I am an Amalekite.' He said to me, 'Come, stand over me and kill me, for convulsions have seized me, and yet my life still lingers.' So I stood over him and killed him, for I knew that he could not live after he had fallen. I took the crown that was on his head and the armlet that was on his arm, and have brought them here to my Lord." So as we were reading in 1 Samuel, we heard that Saul had asked his armor bearer to kill him so that he would not be killed by the Philistines. Armor bearer was too afraid to do that, so Saul fell on his sword. Here, this young man is saying that he did it, that he found him leaning on his spear, and that he's not dead yet, that he's struggling. And so he goes ahead and finishes him off and brings his crown and his armlet to David. Verse 11, Then David took hold of his clothes and tore them, and all the men that were with him did the same. And this young man's an Amalekite. Amalekite were the ones that just came and raided Ziklag, and then David had to go and take them back. So they're not exactly friends with the Amalekites. Verse 12, They mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the army of the Lord and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. David said to the young man who had reported to him, Where do you come from? He answered, I am the son of a resident alien, an Amalekite. So a resident alien means that he's been living in Israel, even though he's an Amalekite. He's kind of like a permanent resident, and therefore he's under the same law as everybody else in Israel. David said to him, Were you not afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? Then David called to one of the young men and said, Come here and strike him down. So he struck him down, and he died. David said to him, Your blood must be on your head, for your own mouth has testified against you, saying, I have killed the Lord's anointed. So immediate capital punishment. You killed Saul, even though Saul had asked to die. You killed Saul, so you're dead. David apparently has no problem wielding his authority. Verse 17. David intoned this lamentation over Saul and his son Jonathan. He ordered that the song of the bow be taught to the people of Judah. It is written in the book of Jasher. He said, Your glory, O Israel, lies slain upon your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, or the daughters of the Philistines will rejoice. The daughters of the uncircumcised will exult. You mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon you, nor bounteous fields. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul, anointed with oil no more. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, nor the sword of Saul return empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and in death, they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you with crimson and luxury, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan lies slain upon your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Greatly beloved were you to me. Your love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war perished. So even though there was a lot of difficulty between King Saul and David really he tried. He was not going to kill the Lord's anointed. He was trying to serve his king, and he was very, very good friends with Jonathan. And he is mourning. He is sad that he has lost Jonathan, his friend. Chapter 2. Even if, I guess before I go into chapter 2, just to say, even when relationships are complicated, we still grieve. Chapter 2. After this, David inquired of the Lord, shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? The Lord said to him, go up. David said, to which shall I go up? He said, to Hebron. So David went up there, along with his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David brought up the men who were with him, every one of his household, and they settled in the towns of Hebron. Then the people of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. So his town that he was living in, Ziklag, had been burned down, and it was really part of the territory of Gath and the Philistines. Judah is a very large territory in the south, and so he's like, should I go back to Judah? And God says, yes, go back to Judah. So he goes to Hebron and settles there with all his men and their people, so probably 600 followers plus wives and children, at least 1,000, possibly a lot more than that. 1,500 to 2,000 people have just moved to Hebron. And then they have anointed him as king. He's already anointed, but the people in Judah have said, okay, you're king. When they told David it was the people of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul, David sent messengers to the people of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, may you be blessed by the Lord, because you showed this loyalty to Saul your lord and buried him. Now may the Lord show steadfast love and faithfulness to you, and I too will reward you because you have done this thing. Therefore let your hands be strong and be valiant, for Saul your lord is dead, and the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. So he's trying to make friends with the city of Jabesh Gilead. Verse 8, but Abner, son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbaal, son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. He made him king over Gilead. Now, it doesn't say that he was anointed. It just says that Abner has decided that he's going to be the king. So, Ishbaal is one of the sons that did not get killed. So he's Saul's son. He's not the oldest son. But Saul was their first king, so it's not exactly like they've got a usual process of inheritance at this point. Verse 9, he made him king over Gilead, the Asherites, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and over all Israel. Ishbaal, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David. The time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. So some of these dates are a little fuzzy, but this is what it says. So verse 12, Abner, son of Ner, and the servants of Ishbaal, son of Saul, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. Joab, son of Zeruiah, and servants of David, went out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. One group sat on one side of the pool, while the other sat on the other side of the pool. Abner said to Joab, "Let the young men come forward and have a contest before us." Joab said, "Let them come forward." So they came forward and were counted as they passed by, 12 for Benjamin, and Ishbaal son of Saul, and 12 for the servants of David. Each grasped his opponent by the head, and thrust his sword into his opponent's side, so they fell down together. Therefore that place was called, Helkath Hazurim, which the footnote says is field of sword edges. So they're trying apparently to have just a few fight against each other instead of having the whole armies fight against each other, and they all killed each other. Helkath Hazurim, which is at Gibeon. The battle was very fierce that day, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten by the servants of David. Verse 18, three sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now Asahel was swift as a wild gazelle. Asahel pursued Abner, turning neither to the right nor to the left as he followed him. Then Abner looked back and said, "Is it you, Asahel?" He answered, "Yes, it is." Abner said to him, "Turn to your right or turn to your left, and seize one of the young men and take his spoil." But Asahel would not turn away from following him. Abner said again to Asahel, "Turn away from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I show my face to your brother Joab?" But he refused to turn away. So Abner struck him in the stomach with the butt of his spear, so that the spear came out of his back. He fell there and died where he lay, and all those who came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died stood still. The commentary says that perhaps he did not mean to kill Asahel because he hits him with the butt end of his spear. But I'm trying to remember who Zeruiah. I should remember who Zeruiah is. And this is the thing, there's going to be so many names. Like, oh my goodness. Zeruiah has 3 sons, Joab, Abishai, Asahel. And I don't even see who they are. Oh my, I should have found that before or not even said anything about it. But basically, lots of fighting. So Abner was the commander of Saul's army, and Abner has killed some of the followers of that are following David. So he's killed Asahel. Verse 24, but Joab and Abishai pursued Abner. As the sun was going down, they came to the hill of Ammah, which lies before Giah on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. The Benjaminites rallied around Abner and formed a single band. They took their stand on the top of a hill. Then Abner called to Joab, "Is the sword to keep devouring forever? Do you not know that the end will be bitter? How long will it be before you order your people to turn from pursuit of their kinsmen?" Joab said, "As long as God lives, if you had not spoken, the people would have continued to pursue their kinsmen, not stopping until morning." Joab sounded the trumpet, and all the people stopped. They no longer pursued Israel or engaged in battle any further. Abner and his men traveled all that night through the Arabah, that's a desert. They crossed the Jordan, and marching the whole forenoon, they came to Mahanaim. Joab returned from the pursuit of Abner, and when he had gathered all the people together, there were missing of David's servants 19 men besides Asahel. But the servants of David had killed of Benjamin 360 of Abner's men. They took up Asahel and buried him in the tomb of his father, which was at Bethlehem. Joab and his men marched all night, and the day broke upon them at Hebron. So a war is going on between Abner, who is the commander of Saul's armies, and now he has put Ishbaal in place. So Abner's a strong political person, and Joab and his brothers Abishai and Asahel are on David's side, and they're having the war. And right now David's doing pretty good, although people are dying. So it's a complicated book, and I can't even remember who Zeruiah is. I should probably remember who he is. I believe he was one of the ones that was serving David, and he has 3 sons. We will keep going through 2 Samuel, and it's just not a pretty book. Lots of murders, executions, and war, and terrible things happening to people. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord look at you with favor and give you peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go in peace. Like, subscribe, comment. We'll see you again next time. Thanks for being here.